Welcome, friends. Welcome to another edition of Freeing the Body, Freeing the Soul. I'm your host, Dr. David, the Cutting Edge Doc. And here on Freeing the Body, Freeing the Soul, we do in-depth interviews with individuals that are doing cutting edge work in the areas of healing or spirituality or social transformation. I'm very excited about today's show. We have a return guest, spiritual guide and teacher and former success coach and mind manager, Matthew Ferry. And last time, I think we got our feet wet in giving you guys an introduction to Matthew and his work. And Matthew and I agreed, I think either at the end of the last show or after we were off the air, that we both were excited about continuing and taking a deeper dive into Matthew and his work. And I think we touched on it briefly last time, but I know Matthew will explain this better than I, but just to give you a context, the way he describes his work, his public work, he describes it with 4 pillars. And so we wanted to identify those and take a deeper dive. And hopefully this conversation will not just be about Matthew and his work, but I will offer myself up as a guinea pig at any moment so that you can actually get a taste and be in the presence of Matthew's work as well. So with that, I really, I'm going to kind of turn it over to Matthew and let's see where this goes. So Matthew,
get the guinea pig.
Welcome back to Freeing the Body, Freeing the Soul.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. I think that the idea of guinea pig is a great idea. We didn't discuss that beforehand, but I think that that's terrific. What I am excited about sharing with your viewers is at least the basics of the rapid enlightenment process. And I think probably the first thing to do, David, is to at least give my definition of enlightenment, so that people understand where it is that I'm coming from. I'm not an Eastern mysticism guy. I have a cursory understanding of Buddhism and Hinduism and various religions. I grew up in more of a Judeo-Catholic kind of family. But even then, my mom was going to be a nun. My parents went to Catholic school, but by the time they had me, they were not practicing anything. So, my experience of that stuff is pretty limited. What's happened for me is that I've realized that enlightenment is actually a form of optimization, which might sound like spiritual materialism, but when one looks even closer, you realize that spiritual materialism is about influencing the world to get what you want, which is actually just a hidden survival motive. We'll talk about those. And optimization is not necessarily a survival process at all. It's an aspect of the 2 forces that are occurring in the universe, what is called a strong force, which is a creative force, and a weak force, which is a destructive force. So creation and entropy. And so my intention is to promote an idea that enlightenment is nothing more than connecting with that creative force that is within you and just giving yourself over to it. So I say that enlightenment is the recognition that the source of life for you is the source of life for everyone and everything. That we're all the same thing, expressing itself with infinite variety. And that at the most fundamental level, enlightenment is the recognition, the perspective that all is well. And you and I were having a discussion before we started hit the record button. We were having a discussion about this idea that the world is I'm not sure exactly how you said it, so I'd like for you to maybe repeat it for our viewer, but that the world is maybe a less focused, a more disgruntled, harder to have intelligent conversation kind of place. Can you just put it back out there in the world, and then let's see if we can frame it up inside of an enlightened perspective?
Sure. But before I do that, I want to say that, my initial response to your definition of enlightenment uh, and I am pretty well steeped in Eastern thought as well as Western thought, is that even though I've heard all that before, and a lot of my tribe have heard all that before, um, what is important to me about you and your work is that there are a lot of people that have heard that and have a conceptualization of that, but it doesn't make any difference for them in the quality of their life or the effectiveness in their life. And I just want my viewers to know that what is important to me and what I really admire about Matthew's work is that in my opinion, through a combination of his presence and the precision of his technology, he's able to be with people in such a way that the words he was talking about start to become real for people in their own life experience, and it shows up in the results in their life. And so I did want to say that before I directly address what you were talking about. And what we were talking about was that before we started recording, well, let me say this. I'm also a student of Matthew's work. And so I'm interested in Matthew's work from that standpoint, but I'm also interested in Matthew's work from a sort of socio-professional point of view, in the sense that one of my great passions is transformation and connecting people with other people that are doing great stuff. So my interests are multiple there. And so one of the things that Matthew's been coaching me on has been encouraging me to let go of my attachment to needing to help people and needing to change things. And for some reason, that, even though I'm 62 years old, it triggered a vivid memory for me when I was about 19 years old, when I'd been in college for maybe about a year. And when I was in high school, it wasn't the happiest time in my life. And one of the ways that I coped with being in high school was having this fantasy about the future, that once I got into college, that things would be quite a bit different, and that I'd be meeting a different caliber type of minds and people and having a more satisfying life. And it was about probably 7 or 8 months into my college career where I realized that a lot of the things that I valued about putting a high value on truly learning and truly understanding, rather than just getting ahead or memorizing something, or being able to choose between other people's ideas, but to truly be able to think for yourself and to look at things and to look at how you're looking at things, that which I enjoyed so much, that I realized that either other people didn't know how to do that, or they didn't care to do that, but whatever, it wasn't very present. And I was sharing with Matthew that was very shocking to me at the time, when I was 19 years old, back around 1974, 1975. And then somehow we got talking about that particular time in history. And I said to Matthew that if I compare like the level of discourse, say in television series at that time, debates, political debates at that time, social conversation at that time, social interaction, attention span, if I compare that to what I see in the collective now, I said to Matthew that I think collectively beyond a shadow of a doubt, there's been a huge dumbing down. And in my opinion, by design. But I'm not going to get into that.
Yeah.
So, and as evidence for my assertion, I would just point to television shows, movies, what's going on at universities these days, the type of conversation you might have at a party, and things like that. And then Matthew was saying, well, that's your reality. There are other points of view that are equally valid. And I would say to that, well, yeah, there are other points of view, but I think there's a lot of evidence, not just personal evidence, but collective evidence for that assertion. And he wanted me to kind of bring all that back up into the moment.
Yeah. So I'm just going to say this.
While we were recording.
How does it serve you to have that perspective? And the answer is it fulfills on a couple of things that I'd like you to just kind of test with me here, okay? So when we have that kind of perspective, there's a couple things occurring. One, we get to be better than other people. So there's the right way to operate, which is no discourse, interesting conversations, meaningful, harmonious. And for spiritual people, we stand up on our high horse and we basically apply survival perspectives to an enlightened framework, which actually creates our own set of discourse. So when I look into the world, I say the world should be more like me, which is irrational. The world doesn't care. No one cares. But what happens is when I look into the world and I go, wow, there's conversations that I deem not meaningful occurring. There is things happening on TV which I deem discourse happening. What's happening is I'm taking my framework and rather than admitting I'm seeing the entire world through a filter of my own creation, rather than admitting that, I'm saying this is the world. The world is fixed and I have to deal with the world, which makes me a victim. And at the exact same time, in order to overcome the victimhood, I make myself superior. So it's a way of surviving by being arrogant, by being better than. This is the objective of the psychology of a human being, especially one with great intelligence like you. With great intelligence, you, me, our viewers, we are going to lean in the direction of making ourselves better, mostly because we are optimizers. We're looking into the world and we're going, oh, you know what, if you just tweak that, do blah, 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 it's going to work better. So you just see that stuff, David, me too. But the game for us now is to step back and go, okay, is this am I empowering myself to be at peace? Am I looking at this through the lens that all is well? In general, we are in a time of tremendous change, and it is phenomenal. And I hate to break the news, brother, but in the 70s, you were in a time of incredible change. And then in the 80s, you were in a time of incredible change. And then in the 90s, you were in a time of incredible change. And here we are in the time of incredible change because things are changing. It's never stopping. We are evolving quickly, and we're evolving more quickly now with the spread of information. There's nothing wrong in the world. The only thing that makes something wrong is your opinion about it. So the only thing that causes your suffering is your opinion. Opinions are the source of suffering. Now, if you're inspired to do something that provides an opportunity for people who are interested in the same things you're interested in, which might be having very deep, intelligent, interesting conversations that are about potentially creating higher standards for social situations. If you're interested in that, coming at it from the standpoint of this way is wrong, therefore we should change it, will not create the result that you want. you'll actually be the thing that you don't want. You'll actually be disgruntled. You'll actually be agitated. You'll be annoyed, rather than appreciating, honoring, and understanding that expression that is coming up, that's bubbling up from the quantum field. Everything that we are, everything that we see is nothing more than a pervasive background field of energy and information that is expressing itself in a variety of ways. And some of those ways you prefer, and others you don't. And your opinion doesn't really matter. In the end, nothing matters. And because nothing matters, you get to choose what does for you. The question is, are you choosing with consciousness? Are you choosing those things that make this happen? Or are you choosing those things that make this happen? You get to decide. And it's not important. It's really just about the experience that you're having here on Earth. Would you like to have a wonderful, delicious experience? Great. Do you want to be disgruntled and agitated and against things? Okay. You get to decide. I just wonder if you're choosing. It doesn't feel like you are, just given that I've gotten to know you. You seem like a guy who's interested in peace and joy and flow, and yet when you engage in an against point of view, there's no possibility of peace and joy and flow.
It has to do with, like you said, it has to do with the context. It has to do with whether one is following one's passion and preferences, or whether one is fundamentally pushing against something. I say it's possible, and I think you agree, but you think it's rare. I think you think it's rare in the world today. I say it's possible to be passionate about some of the interests that I have.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to ask you to use your muscle testing, which you have as a skill set, which is that's a rare skill that you have that can be used in a very interesting way. But to use your muscle testing to discern if the direction or the context with which you are holding about your passions is strengthening you or weakening you. Is it putting you into your optimized state, or is it putting you into your entropic or degraded state? And
I think I go in and out.
Yeah.
I think I go by tracking my experience as an indicator, by tracking when I feel joy and peace and flow, and when I feel tension and irritation. My conclusion is that I go in and out.
Yep. And I would like to propose that we can massively tip the scales in the direction of joy, peace, and flow, and that you can be in the soup of the world and be in a, let's call it 90% joy, peace, and flow, 10% disgruntled, agitated, annoyed. And in no way am I proposing that there's 100% joy, peace, and flow available. I've been pushing for years and years, for decades, to optimize in that state. And I will tell you that there is a natural ebb and flow that happens. And by controlling your context, you actually optimize in the direction of more joy and flow. Let me talk about these 4 pillars. I just want to give you for the framework that I use. So I do 4 things, and these are the things I've been working on with my clients. 1 is to identify and to transcend the unconscious reflexes of the drunk monkey, and I'll come back to that. 2 is to release and heal or correct the imbalance of the hidden motives to survive, which is a survival framework in consciousness. 3 is to pierce through the denial mechanism by utilizing a strong and weak response with muscle testing to determine, is something strengthening me or weakening me? And then 4, the master skill that I think we both are excited about, is recontextualization. How do I, in essence, reframe the situation so that I am at least neutral, with the goal to move from neutral to empowered? So to be in the middle of what I was previously experiencing as this sucks, moving to this isn't anything, and then ultimately going to all is well, what do I want? How do I do that? And that is actually a language process, but that language cannot be accessed most of the time, and it can't be accessed because the first three things get in the way. But what do you want to talk about first?
And I love that model because it is elegant and it's powerful, and it explains, to me, a model that's really good is not only elegant and powerful, but it helps me to understand why, when something works, maybe why it works, and when something doesn't work, maybe why it doesn't work. And for someone like myself that has studied the wave of spirituality as it's flowed through our culture over the last several decades, one of the things that I've noticed is that on one hand, you have what I would call maybe process junkies, people that really are able to get in touch with their experience, and they process and process till the cows come home, but nothing really shifts. Then you have this camp that says, no, that's not where it's at. Just shift your context. And my experience of a lot of those people is that they're nowhere near as clear as they think they are. And many of them are in tremendous denial and have a tremendous amount of repressed emotion. And
they have hidden motives.
Right. And so what I like about your model is that it is an invitation to be able to not only process authentically if you need to, but it also allows room for transformation, for true recontextualization that isn't just
La La Land.
One of my concerns about the way your teaching could be perceived by someone who's not as sophisticated in this game as I am is that someone could perceive it just as more New Age caca. But in my experience, it's not, because of the comprehensive nature of what you're offering, and yet the fact that you've been able to distill it into 4 major pillars. My guess is that for a pretty radical teaching, your teaching is much more accessible for many people in Western culture than other teachings. And that, for someone like myself that's interested in innovation, like, I don't care how good an invention is, if a community of people don't adopt that innovation as a new practice and then have that new practice improve their lives, it's not interesting to me. I'm kind of like a practical visionary type person, and I sort of see you in a similar way. And so I want to say to people that, if you could discount what Matthew's teachings because you could think, oh, this is just more New Age mumbo jumbo that says, oh, you make it all up, so you might as well just make it up in a way that works for you. And it's like, that's kind of a little bit like a meal that feels good, but then you're hungry a half hour later. And that's not what we're talking about here. There's an opportunity here for something that's much richer than that. So I wanted to say that. So
David, I cut my teeth on Wall Street, and Wall Street is an industry where people have to be at the highest level of rational thinking in order to succeed in that business. And I am forever grateful to that industry, because that industry, the people in that industry, forced me to explain what was initially a mystical experience and to systemize it and have it make sense to the rational mind. And
Yes.
that has been such an incredible blessing for me.
Well, as I've mentioned before publicly in writing, one of the things that I think is unique about you is that I see you as, in some ways, I see you as a mystic. I see you as someone who knows unity consciousness, someone who knows the reality of the unified field. But I also see you as someone who has very good left brain sort of mental organization system skills. And I see the elegance of your first pillar model as evidence of that. And then it seems like you also like to teach and you like to coach. And so
I do.
so those three things together, I haven't seen a lot in one person. And that's what part of why I'm so publicly endorsing you and so publicly endorsing your work, because
Thank you for that.
because the combination of those things, and the accessibility that affords your work is very important to me. And I enjoy that. And at the same time, just for full transparency, given my guinea pigness here, my mind also goes from there to notions about, from a certain perspective, how incredibly out of balance our culture is today and how unsustainable it is in terms of well-being. And that from a cultural perspective, we are sort of at the final stages of a massive breakdown of an entire paradigm and the systems that reflect and express that paradigm. And so what I'm working on with you is to be able to be with that awareness in a way that doesn't increase my level of tension.
Yeah, and you're a leading edge thinker, and most of the people who would be watching this particular interview or listening to it on the podcast are going to be leading edge thinkers, and that doesn't make you more special. It's just that in the iterative process of evolution, there are new ideas, new thoughts, new ways of operating, new visions that come through. So there's the physical version of evolution, where you have iteration in the gene, and these essentially a mistake that then starts to take root. Whoa, isn't that cool? And then it continues to grow and starts to dominate. But you also have that exact same thing occur in consciousness, and consciousness hasn't been able to be scientifically defined just yet. We're certainly on our way. But in consciousness, you have these iterations. You have people like you and I, which were anomalies prior to this. But what was once an anomaly, which let's call the desire for harmony, peace, flow, and joy, was an incredible anomaly. And if we're being honest, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, the chances of you surviving as a person committed to harmony were almost zero. And yet it kept coming through. And today we have literally hundreds of millions of people around the planet who are no longer in a survival state. The iteration of humanity and consciousness is now taking advantage of this incredible state of abundance that we are all living inside of. Now, the old mind, which is the one that you are so mired by, I believe, this is an assumption, the old mind of that the world is a bad place and we need to figure out how to correct it so we can all live in the harmony that I see. That's like that's an old paradigm. That paradigm is the suffering. And the game for you is to begin to bust it and to find the hidden motives. So let's just talk about these 4 pillars. Step 1 in the pillar is to transcend the unconscious reflexes of the drunk monkey. So the drunk monkey is the talking in your head. David, it's not the thing you don't want to try to control it.
Sure.
Because if you try to control your mind will fight back.
Absolutely.
You look in the mirror and you are doing affirmations. And I used to be an affirmation fanatic. Probably one of my most successful music projects was called Energy Affirmations, and it's still on iTunes today. I still get it paid all the time, and this is a product that's based on the idea that you expose yourself to positive thoughts over and over and over and over, and it will transform your brain. And while that has merit at one level, let's say, if you expose yourself to positive thoughts on a regular basis, you will certainly become more positive, but you will not achieve peace.
Yes.
So you look in the mirror and you say, I love myself, and your mind will literally say, that's BS. You're ugly and you're fat. Your mind will fight back. And it isn't until you understand why that is. And my mentor, Dr. Hawkins, and I know he's one of your mentors as well, my mentor, Dr. Hawkins, said the only way to get the mind to stop is to understand its motivation. Now, unfortunately, I scoured his material and I could never find what that methodology was. How do you understand its motivation? And so that's what led me through the process of systemizing this. But the unconscious reflexes, so you have avoiding failure is an unconscious reflex. It's like the hammer hits your knee and then boom, your leg flips up. When faced with the possibility of risk, the mind has a natural reflex to avoid the risk. That's built in. And if you don't see it, you'll avoid risks that are a figment of your imagination. The drunk monkey's in a constant state of trying to follow rules that don't exist. But it will do everything it's like, well, this is the way it works, and this is how we operate, and we do it all like this, and we have to work. And it's constantly trying to box reality in and follow a set of rules that it has been conditioned to believe are a best practice by your parents, by the culture, et cetera, in order to not lose favor or be rejected or whatever that is. It's going to, in a very very debilitating way, try to avoid embarrassment and, right? I mean, there's all these reflexes. Go onto my website, MatthewFerry.com, and just type in the drunk monkey, or even just type in the drunk monkey into Google, and a bunch of my videos and things should come up, and I brief on what all the unconscious reflexes are. That is phase 1. That will not likely serve you, David, because you can see that your mind is talking and you can see, oh, that's not me. But I think the thing that is tripping you up, which was the thing that tripped me up, because I was a guy who was meditating for 4 hours at a time. I was going into these incredible peaceful states, but I couldn't maintain them. So we talked about in the beginning, the volatility. How do I get from 50% happiness, 50% disgruntled? How do I begin to optimize and move the happiness into greater and greater percentage of my existence? And I was able to get it, through tremendous amount of meditation and yoga and all the external things that we have learned. I was able, and seeing the mind and acknowledging the mind and seeing the float, letting the thoughts float away and mindfulness, all of that stuff. I got pretty good, maybe 65, 70% of the time. But man, when you're at 65, 70% of the time, and that 30% of negativity shows up, it's actually way worse than it was when it was 50-50. You know what I'm saying? When it was 50-50, it's like, well, sometimes I'm happy, sometimes I'm mad. And it was no big deal. But as you get more and more happy, when you're unhappy, when you're sad, angry, miserable, frustrated, whatever, the intensity, the contrast of that is so, it's terrible. And so that drove me. Why is it that I can see the mind, I can let the thoughts go, I can be with the thoughts, I can do all that stuff, and I'm still getting triggered? What is that? And through the muscle testing modality, I was able to zero in with another mentor of mine on these ideas of, in consciousness, there are effective and winning evolutionary iterations of thinking. And I call them the hidden motives to survive. And these hidden motives to survive are not necessarily human. So think about greed. Think about grudge, right? Think greed. Just think of a squirrel. It's going to go grab as many nuts as it possibly can. It only actually ends up with about 50% of them. You can't even remember where to put them all. Greed. It is the fear that there won't be enough, so you get as much as you can. Food, love, money, experiences, adrenaline, whatever it is. Greed. You have grudges that we hold. This is a very effective survival strategy. You see a thing that you don't like, it negatively affects you. Now Siri is jumping into the conversation with us. You see a thing that you don't like, it negatively affects you. Then consciousness has this mode where it says, keep an eye on that thing. We don't like that. You hold this grudge in order to keep it away. Greed, grudge, hatred, victim, illogical rules. Humble. Humble's a big one. We spiritual types, we think, oh, being humble, that's the way to go. Wrong. Being humble, actually, if we look at Dr. Hawkins' scale, being humble calibrates low, because it's about you making yourself less than others in order to not upset the apple cart and bring negativity to you. And that's not a thriving state. That's a survival state. Greed, grudge, hatred, victim, illogical rules, humble, traitor. Traitor's a big one for people like you and I, because we are optimizers. The world is still currently predominantly in a survival state. So when you say, hey, love and peace and joy, people are like, screw you, buddy, and you bring negativity upon yourself. So we activate a part of our consciousness, which is to hide. So greed,
that one, as you know, really rings my bell.
Mine too.
And it as I've been with that one, it's taken me back to a memory that I've been aware of for many years, but haven't completely worked through because it keeps coming up, that maybe you can help me with now. It's a memory of being quite young, maybe like a toddler, and being in my natural, exuberant, enthusiastic state of energy, and being with my mother and being aware of two things. I mean, I didn't have the vocabulary at the time as a toddler, but at some level being aware of two things. That when I was at that level of energy, two things happened. One, there was a disconnect between me and my mom. My mom couldn't be with those frequencies. And the other thing was that it actually triggered discomfort for her. And
if you remove the phrase "she couldn't be with those frequencies," then the what you're talking about will be more empowering. So okay. I've been muscle testing everything that you're saying, and you're doing it.
Okay.
Keep going.
I mean, maybe she could, but she didn't want to. I don't know.
So yeah. So the idea of frequencies actually is a degrading thought for you.
Say more about that, because I don't understand that one.
Well, keep going with your idea about traitor, and then we'll talk about it.
Okay. So just bringing it back. So here I was, really enthusiastic, wanting to share something with her, whatever, that I was really excited about. And instead of that interaction being joyous for me, from my perception, which I think was pretty clear at the time, that it was certainly not joyous for her. There was a disconnect in terms of being able to be present with me. And I have a very strong hunch that I made up some stories and made up some rules around that, or correlated with that, that if I'm really just being myself, if I'm just being out there about what I love, what I want, what I'm passionate about.
Yeah, you're gonna be degraded or harmed or rejected or something, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's traitor.
Yeah. So I wanted to tell
traitor, and I just want you to know it's built in for all of us. All of us have all of the hidden motives. The question becomes, can you find the hidden motive, and can you release or heal the hidden motive? And you do that through a process of both recognizing and setting your intention to release it. I wanted to read to you a couple of the the unconscious reflexes of the drunk monkey, because they weren't popping into my head. Forecasting the negative, that's something the drunk monkey does automatically. It has the desire to fit in, holding others accountable to agreements they never made, avoiding making the same mistake twice, following rules that don't exist, and avoiding failure. And then we have opinions on everything, and it has opinions on everything. So if you can't spot those things happening, then the possibility of peace is radically diminished. But then the hidden motives are underneath that. So in phase one, you got to make sure that you can spot the unconscious reflexes of the drunk monkey, which is just an awareness exercise. So I say it like this. To me, I call this the game changer formula. And that is very simply that awareness makes you flexible, which reveals new options. And that's what gives you power. That when you have options, you have power. And we know this because we actually have much more experience with the opposite of that. And that is when we feel like we have no options, we feel like a victim, like we're powerless. So options give you power, or lack of options make you powerless.
Absolutely.
And go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm just agreeing with you. Absolutely.
So the objective is to first see the drunk monkey, have an awareness of it. Then the next phase of your journey is to see those hidden motives and to start spotting greed, grudge, hatred, victim, illogical rules, humble, traitor, pride, lazy, resistance. In my book, I actually go through, let me see if I can find the photo for you here. In my book, I actually show you how the hidden motives are affecting the drunk monkey here. So I'm turning through. Here we go. Oh, so that's the drunk monkey. So it's going to be after that. Avoiding failure. Here we are. Good. We're getting closer. Opinions on everything. Oh, baby. All right. Hidden motives. So the hidden motives, one of the things that I did was I went in and I actually, it's not back here, it's back here. I went in and I calibrated the level of consciousness of every hidden motive. So you can see here that these are the hidden motives, and the hidden motives are driving the survival mind. Then you add the rapid enlightenment process, and that brings you into the quiet mind. And what we've been noticing is that even Maslow's hierarchy of needs lives in survival consciousness. That self-realization is still survival consciousness. That the moment you then see that all of reality is a figment of your imagination, boom, you go into quiet mind. And quiet mind is the recognition that all is well. Self-realization does not include all is well. But for example, if we look at resistance was the very first hidden motive that appeared in consciousness. This is what tests strong using muscle testing. And it calibrates on Dr. Hawkins' scale at 0.245. So it's sub 1 resistance,
Just letting the viewers know, the Hawkins scale of consciousness goes from 0 to 1,000, where he was postulating that 1,000 would be like the consciousness of Krishna or
the avatar.
Christ. Yes.
Yep, exactly right. And it's an arbitrary scale. He made it up, and then he muscle tested, and then he utilized scientific method to corroborate his own muscle tests, and had thousands of other people do the exact same thing, so that we could then come up with a scale that we could all rely on. Really cool. So my objective here is to, 1, help people see the drunk monkey, 2, help them to heal the hidden motives, and then 3, to utilize the muscle testing framework in a completely new way. So our mentor...
I need to interrupt you for a minute. What do you mean when you say heal the hidden motives?
So it's like this. The hidden motives are actually out of integrity for who we are. So it's like this. Here is this new version of humanity coming through. When I say new, I just mean like a different iteration, a different version, different expression on an old theme. And there are all these legacy aspects of this new human. You, me, probably our listener, right? This is, if you're interested in this, you're interested in inner optimization, which has not become a fashionable version of humanity until recently. So as this inner optimized human being comes into existence, there's all of these legacy parts of consciousness which are creating a disruption. The disruption could be most specifically called a lack of integrity. And when I say integrity, I mean the actual definition of integrity, which is corrupted, so it's uncorrupted, blah, 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 right? It's workable, functioning. So it's kind of like what we see with muscle testing. When we muscle test, there are certain statements that cause the body to function and come together and work in what is an expected fashion, strong. And then there are other statements that we expose the body to where the body struggles to be able to maintain its ability. In other words, it becomes corrupted and the muscle goes weak. So when we test the hidden motives on you, me, or anybody, what we will find is that when a hidden motive is present in consciousness, the body lacks integrity. So you can't physically function the way you normally would, and you can't mentally function the way you normally would. By the way, on Wall Street, this becomes a huge advantage because the possibility of getting caught up in greed or pride on Wall Street is essentially 100 out of 100. You're going to get caught up in it. So to be able to spot it and then to be able to correct the imbalance and get it back balanced again puts you into a place where your thinking is now uncorrupted. And to be able to think in an uncorrupted fashion is an advantage. So in that way, David, many of our spiritual elitists, the arrogant spiritual types of the world, would say, oh, you're just talking about spiritual materialism. But actually, enlightenment is nothing more than human or consciousness evolving into greater states of complexity and efficiency. And that which is inefficient will ultimately die off and no longer exist and will be overtaken by that which is efficient. Enlightenment is extremely efficient.
I agree, and that's why I consider you a practical visionary. because of what you're saying right now, that there's a unity there.
There is. So this idea of muscle testing, I'll give you some ideas here, okay? I'll just go into my book. So the idea with muscle testing, when you and I were studying our mentor, Dr. Hawkins, he just went off on this idea that was so exciting to him, which was that a strong muscle test means true and a weak muscle test means false. And over time, for me, I had to abandon that, because what I found was adding the idea of true and false into the process actually creates a position.
Yes.
And that the moment you take a position on something is the moment that you weaken yourself. And I ultimately had to stand on my mentor's shoulders and then reach for the next thing. And I wish that he was here for me to have these discussions with him.
I was just going to ask you, did you ever have the opportunity to, even in writing, to communicate with him? No.
I was too much of a traitor. I was keeping myself hidden. When I look back, David, I look back and I realize I was doing everything that I could to have people appreciate my perspectives, and therefore, the majority of my life, I was not fully sharing everything that I was experiencing out of a traitor imbalance, essentially. And while I had him speak at one of my events, and it was a mind-blowing experience, and I went and I attended many of his events and scoured his materials and listened to all of his audios, on and on and on. I had actually no communication with him whatsoever. So,
well, I'm sure you would agree with me that the best way to honor your teachers is to stand on their shoulders and keep going.
That's right. That is my objective. So what happened for me was I realized that strong doesn't mean true and weak doesn't mean false. And when I say I realized that, I just mean that I found that context was actually more strengthening, and ultimately to help a person to adopt dogmatic frameworks that are strengthening, you must admit that you're full of shit. You have to start by saying, this is not a true statement. This is a statement that tests strong on your body. It causes your body to be fortified and to work effectively. And if we test your dogmatic statements, your statements that are not true, not provable, no one's ever proven if they're right or wrong, if we test those statements, we will see that many of the things you believe cause your body to malfunction, and you're not able to maintain your fortitude. And when I finally got myself to a place of recognizing that that's really the only thing that matters. Is it causing me to function, or is it causing me to malfunction? When I finally got to that place, people's consciousness started going through the roof, and people began to go into extreme quiet mind states because they could then adopt frameworks as a scientist, as a test to see, does this framework fortify me? For example, the first time that I ever tested that I lived, or we lived, or anyone that I was testing have lived multiple human lifetimes, the first time I tested it and it went strong, I was dumbstruck, because I was born and raised in a Christian family. And of course, nobody comes back. When you're gone, you go to a good place or a bad place or a medium place. That's it. And so when I was able to get a strong test for this idea that was more of a Buddhist or Hindu philosophy, I was like, whoa. And I remember the first time that I muscle tested the idea, and I don't know why this just popped into my head, that coming to Earth is like taking a vacation for the soul. When that tested strong, I was like, what the hell does that even mean? What? And it was those moments that drove me into further and further investigation, literally hundreds of thousands of muscle tests, trying to understand what is a strengthening perspective, what is a weakening perspective, but not in the realm of the provable. I will leave the provable to science. The game that I'm playing is in this current realm of the unprovable, what strengthens and what weakens. And in my book, I do an entire chapter on a whole bunch of things that if you begin to adopt a perspective in this way, your mind will go quiet. That's the third pillar in my process.
But I think it's even more than that, because I would say you not only have the experiential evidence that your mind is quieter and you're experiencing more joy and peace, but there's also the natural motion of life also produces changes in your behavior and your results.
That's my whole deal.
So it's not just I'm just extending what you're saying, mostly for the viewers. It's not just that. So you're, if I were to transpose your languaging to the languaging of my main teacher in this lifetime.
Let's do it.
Okay, so my main teacher has been Werner Erhard, and so he makes this distinction between being positional, which we agree weakens you, and what he calls taking a stand. And a stand is created from nothing rather than in resistance to something or compared to something else. And it's not right, it's not wrong, it's not true, it's not true. He calls it a place to stand, and then you live inside that place and you do what you do.
And see what happens. You experiment.
And you see what happens. So
yeah.
The value of what he was bringing into the world in the 70s and 80s, primarily, was this idea of being able to stand on nothing, create contexts, live inside them, and see what happens.
Possibilities.
Yeah, what I think was a weakness in his teaching, and I don't necessarily say it was a weakness in his own person, but for whatever reasons he didn't go there in his public teaching, was he offered very limited tools for addressing the drunk monkey, for addressing the hidden motives, and of course he didn't get into the muscle testing at all. So there were very few people who were able to do what he did, because he had done a lot of inner work before. And so there were a lot of people that tried to do what he did and tried to be in the space he was in, but the roadmap he left people only worked for a very, very small percentage of people.
I don't know if that's actually an effective way to contextualize it. If we look at landmark education today, they're literally affecting millions and millions of people, and the expression of est lives on in a very practical and systematic format, which I have tremendous gratitude for in my own workings and appreciation for. And I think that the leaders at Landmark really stood on the shoulders of their mentor and took it to an incredible place. And I'm with you. I think Werner is fantastic. And I think that the Landmark education methodology, unbelievably effective. And it'll only take you on Dr. Hawkins' scale up to about 540 on Dr. Hawkins' scale, which is where you begin to experience unconditional love.
So what I was going to say is that before you said that, I was going to say that Landmark has done important work in extending Werner's work in a certain direction, but I was going to say it takes you only to a certain point, and there's, I'm just getting into your work. I've only been, formally studying your work for a couple of months, I'd love you to answer this question. because I'm just beginning to feel into it. But there's something about you and your work that's allowing me to very rapidly go way beyond the mid 500 level.
Let's
And
distinguish that for people so they understand what that means. So
maybe you could share with me your perspective about what it is about you and your work that is making it much easier for me. I mean, the leaps I've made in level of consciousness in the last 6 to 8 weeks working
mind-blowing.
with you has been absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, it's crazy. I've gone from I've gone from about 560 to about 660 in about 6 to 8 weeks. And if you understand the nature of that scale,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
If you're a follower of Dr. Hawkins' work, you are almost instantly skeptical of the statement that you just said, because Doc Hawk so vehemently told us that your ascent up the scale was going to be slow, and you may go up 5 or 6 points in your entire lifetime. And the possibility of even going into the 600s, like 50% of the people who go there will die, and all kinds of stuff.
Well, of course, the planet is in a different vibration now too.
That's right. And his work was very, very instrumental in shifting the consciousness of the planet. So in the mid 500s on Dr. Hawkins' scale. So once you go over 500 on Dr. Hawkins' scale, you begin to be in love as an experience rather than love as a I hope that I have that with somebody else. It's sort of like loving nature. It takes work in that process to transcend it. And when you first go into a loving state, you're loving except for that asshole over there. I love you except when you do that. Your love is conditional, and it's conditional upon undistinguished rules that you have. Then you move up, you transcend, you let go, and you go into the 540s and above on Dr. Hawkins' scale. And that's where you start to experience joy. And in joy, where you get stuck, and where almost everyone gets stuck, I find, when you go into a state of joy, you kind of go like, hey, this is amazing. I don't need to take anything on. And where you get stuck, where you get stopped in this zone, why most people don't ascend into those first stages of enlightenment. And on Dr. Hawkins' scale, the 600s are where you start to you're now moving, you're in the pre-enlightened state, and you're moving up rapidly into an enlightened state. And in the high 500s, essentially what you're dealing with is an unwillingness to admit that you're irrelevant, that you don't matter, that your existence has no meaning, no value, and that it is not important. And that
what's interesting is that Werner put that out as an idea. He talked about that
empty and meaningless.
He talked about significance, empty and meaningless, but it didn't take for most people.
Well, because if you don't address the hidden motives, you're not going to ascend into the 600s and beyond. So what I found, so it's sort of like this. When Doc Hawk would say things like, the average person only goes up 5 points, I would think to myself, well, I'm going to go up, I'm going to go up 100, right? I just thought to myself, my ego, that's where my ego actually served me well.
Yes.
And I remember when I first started to do my Breakthrough to Bliss weekends, I was experimenting with this methodology of engaging the ego in a numeric competition to destroy the ego. And I would have my spiritual types come to the Breakthrough to Bliss weekend, and they would literally say to me, like, Matthew, this is BS, dude. We're measuring, we're labeling, we're doing all of this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, we are. How's it working? And they're like, well, my consciousness seems to be going up. So it's like their consciousness is going up because we engage the ego in a competition to rise. And as the ego engages in this idea of rising in consciousness, which really means two things, and I don't think Doc Hawk distinguished this very effectively. It means two things. One, as your consciousness goes up, you see more. Now, the moment you see more, you have the possibility of instantly contracting and seeing less, because when you see more, you then have to accept what you see. And if you can't accept what you see, you will go back down again. And this is what happens for people in the 500s. They go up, they have these incredible revelations. They're in meditation. Oh my God. Then they can't accept it because of the hidden motives. And then they contract right back to where they were again. So then they're like, damn it, how do I have that experience again? So then they go to the next retreat. They go to the next meditation thing. Then they go to the next weekend. They go to the healer, right? And they're trying to get to that revelation again. But what they don't realize is the revelation can't stick unless the underlying framework of reality is restored back into a balanced state, which is to restore the out of integrity of the hidden motives. So why have you been rising? You've been rising because you have been working on dealing with, one, you're full of it. Two, you're full of it that you're full of it. Three, you don't know anything. Four, the things that you think you know are all contextualization and made up. And as you are using all of these tools that I provide in my book and in my daily enlightenments and all of that stuff, what's happening is you're naturally letting go of the stuff that isn't workable for your life, that is all about like life is fixed and it can't be this way and we only operate this way. And I'm from the 60s, and in the 60s we knew this thing and blah, blah, you know what I mean? Like you're just shedding the frameworks that aren't working for you anymore. And as you do that, you see more, and then you're able to accept what you see. And that's why your consciousness goes up and stays, versus you go up when you're exposed to your teacher, you go home and you go back down again. And you go up when you're exposed to your teacher, and then you go back down again.
I've usually been pretty good at, once I become aware of something for a long time, I've been pretty good at being able to accept it. I think the limiting factor for me has been, you don't know what you don't know.
That's right.
And there's something about your framework and working with you and working with one of your advanced students and the combination of the love and the precision of the technology. And one of the things that is helpful for me from where I am right now in my journey is that a lot of the limiting ideas that are using me, I originated not in this incarnation. And so to have a map, an algorithm that invites people to explore that, given where I'm at, and the percentage of blockages that I'm dealing with now in my current incarnation that are limiting me, most of them are not from this incarnation. And so unless you have a way of getting into that world, you're probably going to plateau out.
Agreed. And my greatest desire is to give people the tools to do it themselves. Because to me, it is absolutely horrific to think that people are going to rely on me. Right. I want to play my guitar. I want to go and hang out at the beach. I want to have fun. I don't want to spend my entire life on the hook for helping people get into amazing states. I don't want to be on the road constantly having to use my presence to get people into higher states. It happens. Come be in my presence. I promise you, your mind will go quiet. But here's the thing. If that's the only way that the methodology gets out there into the world, then it dies with me. My objective this time around is very simply to leave the world with a tool that those people who are in the optimizing side of the human equation can utilize to achieve the highest states of consciousness, the most amount of peace, and unbelievable freedom to do whatever it is that you want to do. That's my goal. And David, I'm just realizing, I'm looking at the time, I got to wrap it up in order to get to my next appointment. But here's what I want to leave everybody with. Your mind is both the most amazing tool and a complete pain in your ass. And it doesn't have to be so much of a pain in the ass. It can be an incredible biological / consciousness tool that you can use to create whatever kind of life you want. And that might be a life where you are able to be in the woods by yourself, enjoying your peace with nobody disturbing you. And I suspect that a lot of our friends want to have things like that. Maybe that's a life where you look into your financial world and you go, wow, I'm a complete Nimrod in this area. That doesn't seem very smart. What has been blocking me? How can I remove the contexts that aren't effective here and get myself rocking in this area so that I can make some effective decisions so that long term I have the money that I need and I'm not activating fear in myself all the time by not handling this. There's practicality to being at peace. Peace is one of the most practical things you could possibly do. And it takes work. It's not something that is natural, but I will say this. If you have watched this interview all the way through to this point, peace is your deal. And you can do something right now to make sure that your peace becomes more of your experience and that the non-peace becomes less. And that thing is what I call the rapid enlightenment process.
Real quick, could you give the name of your book?
Name of my book, ladies and gentlemen, right here. I have it right here. Quiet Mind, Epic Life. And this book right here, Escape the Status Quo and Experience Enlightened Prosperity Now. This book is essentially my last 20 years of my life wrapped up into one book, and I am incredibly proud of this book. I hope that you will go out there and read it. I think it will absolutely transform your life. I know it will. If you take it on, your life will never be the same again.
And it's also available on Kindle.
That's right. And we're also going to be giving away 10,000 copies for free for people. So that whole promotion starts next week on December 12th, 2018. If you're watching this later, it's probably already going. Just go to our website, MatthewFerry.com, and check it out.
Matthew, I know we're out of time. Can we agree that we'll do another one sometime in the near future?
Yes, sir.
Great. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to or watching another edition of Freeing the Body, Freeing the Soul, where we do in-depth interviews. I'm Dr. David. We do in-depth interviews with people that are doing cutting-edge work in the areas of healing, spirituality, and social transformation. I hope today we accomplished what I intended, which was to not only let you learn about Matthew and his work, but to also give you a taste of it as well. It was an honor and a privilege to be your guinea pig today. And with that, we'll close with love and peace. Bye for now.
High five, everybody.